All right, so what do we learn this week about mono blue mill? And pretty much we learned that it is a bad idea. And I don't know if this version of it is the problem. I think that the archetype of mono blue mill in and of itself is just not a very strong archetype. First off, our mill cards are just not that great. Our best mill card is probably Mind Sculpt, and that's mill 7 for 2, which isn't that powerful. And then our combo, which was legitimately good. I think we won like 2 games across these matches, and we did legitimately get the combo one time. And when it works, it's awesome, but the odds of it working are just so slim. We have to resolve a tutelage, and then resolve a Jace's Archivist, and wheel a Jace's Archivist, hope that people have cards in their hand, and get a bunch of mill triggers. So that's really sweet when it works. It's just super slow, super fragile, disrupted by everything. So I don't think you can make mono blue mill competitive. I try not to stray too far from the build in our instant deck tech. That's kind of the idea of instant deck techs in Much Abrew, is to test out those builds. I did make a few changes, upping the land count, for example, because 20 lands playing 6 drops is just not practical. It's we would have lost because of that. So I upped a few lands, but I tried to keep it essentially the same. I didn't want to make huge changes, but even if you made the most competitive, and I strayed as far as possible from this build and tried to build the most competitive build, we'd be looking at probably Archive Trap being really good, Hedron Crab plus Fetch Lands being really good. But then the thing is, once you get to the point where you're playing fetch lands to go with your Hedron Crab to power up your Hedron Crab, then you almost have to just go into multiple colors, because the most competitive thing you can do with Mill, and this still isn't insanely competitive, but every once in a while it does well, is play cards like Glimpse the Unthinkable, Mind Funeral. Those are cards that are just way more powerful. In one of the matches I brought up the example is, it felt like we were playing a burn deck with all shocks, also with walls, which you don't normally want in a burn deck, but all of our mill spells were like the equivalent of a shock, or even worse, in terms of how much damage and milling they did to our opponent. But there are some better ones. Glimpse the Unthinkable, for example, 2 mana, 10 cards, and Mind Funeral is 3 mana, but it can potentially mill way more cards. It mills until it hits 4 lands. Occasionally, that'll mill like 15 or 20 cards, so the rate on our burn just wasn't very good. So I think if you really want to be competitive, you gotta go away from mono blue, and really the plan just isn't very good. Playing walls sounds cool, but it's probably better to cut those, cut the fog banks, cut the Kraken hatchlings, try to replace those with actual removal potentially, or card draw like Thought Scour and Visions from Beyond. The plan of using Jace's Erasure and Sphinx's Tutelage with Jace's Archivist, very cute, and I think the idea is neat that someone thought of that, but you could play a Mesmeric Orb and do way more milling than a Jace's Eraser without any work whatsoever, without playing Jace's Archivist. So there's just a lot better options available. I still don't think even the ultimate best possible optimal mill deck, I still don't think that's a tier 1 deck. I know I still don't think it's a tier 2 deck. We've actually played blue-black mill or Esper mill before a while ago, and you can win a match here and there, and it does some interesting things, but it definitely is still not a great archetype. So I think we were pretty far away with this build from being a good mill build, and I think that mill is pretty far away from being a good deck, even if it wasn't our build and it was the best possible build. So I don't know. Maybe next time for mono blue mill, maybe they'll print something to break this deck in the future. But for now, I would not want to play mono blue mill. Anyway, that's been our Much Abrew About Nothing, or maybe more rightly titled Against the Odds, for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed us getting crushed with mono blue mill, and I will talk to you soon.